As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate lace on my maid of honor dress, a wave of nostalgia swept over me. This moment felt surreal, a culmination of years being the responsible sister, always ensuring Rebecca had everything she needed. My reflection stared back, a tapestry of memories, hard work, and silent sacrifices that had led to this day. Rebecca and I were inseparable growing up, our bond forged through shared secrets and countless late-night whispers. I'd always felt an unspoken duty to protect her, to be her shield against life's storms. And now, as her wedding day approached, that sense of responsibility intensified. "Lisa!" Rebecca's excited voice pulled me from my thoughts. She appeared in the doorway, a vision in white. "How do I look?" "Absolutely stunning," I replied. My voice steady, despite the emotions swirling inside me. In truth, seeing her there, radiant, happy, was overwhelming. It was as if all those years of looking out for her had finally brought us to this beautiful moment. As we prepared for the ceremony, I couldn't shake a lingering thought. What did this mean for us? Would marriage change the dynamic between us? The questions hovered at the edges of my consciousness like unwelcome guests. I took a deep breath. "This is your day," I reminded myself silently. I would push aside my worries and focus on celebrating my sister's happiness. But beneath the joy was a current of uncertainty. Was it possible that stepping into this new chapter might shift our roles forever? Time seemed suspended as we awaited the ceremony's commencement. Standing by Rebecca's side held more weight than I'd anticipated. Not just as a role in her wedding, but as a testament to our lifelong bond. The music began to play softly in the background. Our cue was imminent. As we turned towards the aisle together, I steeled myself for whatever lay ahead. It felt like the world was on my shoulders every single day. My mornings began with a silent prayer that today would be enough, that I could stretch myself just a little further without breaking. As a financial consultant, I maneuvered through numbers and strategies. But back home, the figures I juggled were far more personal. My family's futures and Rebecca's dreams. Every time I opened my laptop, it wasn't just for work. It was a door to possibilities beyond the confines of our present reality. "Lisa, can you look at this?" Rebecca's voice broke through one evening as she shoved a stack of university brochures in front of me. Her eyes sparkled with hope and expectation, a reflection of everything we both longed for. "I'm thinking about applying to the full-time program," she added, almost as if testing the waters. I nodded slowly, swallowing the lump that formed in my throat. "Of course," I replied with a smile that belied the pang of anxiety twisting in my stomach. Inside, I waged an internal battle. How much more could I sacrifice before losing myself entirely? But watching Rebecca chase her dreams reminded me why none of it felt optional. It was necessary. Day after day, as hours blurred into nights at my desk, I told myself that each transaction and late-night spreadsheet was one step closer to a brighter future for us all. The sacrifices were heavy, yes, but they were also fueled by love. A love so profound, it anchored me even during storms of doubt. Rebecca smiled at me again across the dinner table later that night. Her gratitude unspoken, but deeply felt. It was there in her laughter and shared glances, the promise that these sacrifices would not be in vain. And so I continued to shoulder this weight, because deep down I believed there would come a day when Rebecca could stand on her own and look back with pride on what we built together. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you strive to balance it all, there's always more expected of you? like you're caught in an endless cycle of proving your worth, not just at work, but to those who should be your biggest supporters. That's exactly where I found myself, managing millions for my company by day, only to return home to a chorus of demands that suffocated every ounce of accomplishment I should have been celebrating. Each morning as I stepped into the office, I felt a surge of purpose. There was something empowering about the precision and control that managing substantial accounts gave me. The numbers danced under my fingertips with a logic and reliability that life outside these walls often lacked. Yet, as soon as I closed my laptop each evening, another dance awaited, a far less predictable, one orchestrated by my family. "Can you handle this for us?" they'd say, their voices echoing through phone calls or text messages. It started small, an errand here, a bill there, but gradually their expectations grew like weeds in a garden left untended. I remember one evening so vividly. I'd just signed off on a monumental deal that took months to secure. My heart was brimming with pride. But before I could even bask in the glow of success, my phone buzzed with another plea from home. "We need you to sort out Grandma's insurance papers." A sigh escaped my lips involuntarily. Inside my head, a battle raged between duty and resentment. Was it wrong to crave acknowledgement and boundaries from those who knew me best? Why did every achievement feel diminished by these familial obligations? As these thoughts churned within me like stormy seas, the weight became unbearable. Something had to change. I couldn't continue being everything for everyone without losing myself in the process. And so began the quiet rebellion within me. A determination not just to reclaim my time, but also my sense of self-worth, separate from their incessant needs. The moment felt like a dream, surreal, and yet so profoundly real that it rooted me right there in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the soft glow of evening light. Rebecca was engaged. My heart skipped at those words, each syllable a testament to the years we'd spent together, weathering storms and celebrating triumphs, never imagining we'd ever stand on the precipice of such a beautiful new chapter. "Lisa," she began, her eyes wide with excitement, yet tender with anticipation, as though offering a rare gem she hoped I'd cherish as much as she did. "Will you be my maid of honor?" For a heartbeat, time stilled. It was one of those moments where everything narrows down into pure feeling. A kaleidoscope spinning wildly with emotion before crystallizing into clarity. Joy surged through me like an incoming tide, sweeping away any doubts or hesitations and leaving only pure, unadulterated happiness. "Yes!" The word leapt from my lips faster than thought, carried by genuine affection and shared history. Her smile grew wider, as if the sun had broken through clouds just for us. We hugged tightly, and I found myself swept up in this mad current of celebration and love. "I can't believe this is happening," I exclaimed. Feeling the warmth of our embrace infused me with hope for all that lay ahead. Rebecca's laughter was like music, light and melodious. And in that moment, I realized just how much this role would mean to me. Not just a title or a duty, but an honor, truly. A chance to stand by her side as she embarked on a new journey. Inwardly, I promised myself that no matter what challenges might come our way, we would face them together. This was more than just an engagement. It was a reaffirmation of friendship that had stood the test of time. As our laughter filled the room, I knew we were crafting memories that would last us both a lifetime. It was a day like any other, until my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. I remember feeling a slight chill as I read the words. She had booked a venue for Rebecca's wedding. The decision was made, without me, without Rebecca. My heart sank. It was as if the ground beneath me shifted, leaving me unsteady and bewildered. "Mom, we should have talked about this," I texted back, my fingers trembling slightly over the screen. But deep down, I already knew what her response would be. It wasn't the first time she had made such unilateral decisions, leaving us to merely follow her lead. Yet, this felt different, more intrusive, more dismissive of our voices. When Rebecca called minutes later, her voice carried a storm of emotions that mirrored my own turmoil. "I can't believe she did this," she confessed, frustration brewing beneath her usually calm demeanor. "Why didn't she ask us first?" I echoed her disbelief. We shared a moment of silence across the line. Two sisters caught in an emotional crossfire, not of our making. The venue booking wasn't just about a location, it was symbolic of so much more. It represented choices being made for us and our opinions being pushed aside. In that moment, anger mingled with sadness in my chest, creating a cocktail of resentment that threatened to spill over. "We need to stand up to her," Rebecca finally said, determination hardening her voice. And just like that, the seed of resolve began to take root within me too. This wasn't just about a wedding venue. It was about reclaiming our voices and making sure they were heard loud and clear. As I hung up the phone, I knew what needed to happen next. Confronting Mum wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. The time had come to break this cycle of control once and for all. I sat at the dining table, surrounded by bridal magazines and swatches of dreamy fabrics, my heart full of excitement and a touch of anxiety. This was supposed to be my wedding after all. But every time I tried to voice an opinion or share a vision with the family, Deborah would swoop in like a relentless storm cloud, casting shadows over my every word. "Lisa," she said one afternoon, her tone sweetly patronizing, "I think it would be best if you leave the planning to someone with more experience." My chest tightened at her suggestion, but I forced a smile. "Deborah, I appreciate your help, but I'd really like to incorporate some personal touches," I replied gently, hoping to assert some semblance of control. Her laugh was light, but dismissive. "Oh, honey," she tittered, as if speaking to a child who had just suggested something outrageously impossible. "Just trust me on this one." Her words echoed in my mind long after she'd left the room. It was like she was erasing me from my own story. Days turned into weeks as Deborah commandeered every detail, from the color scheme to the floral arrangements. Each meeting felt like another nail sealing my silence. I'd watch her effortlessly charm vendors and make decisions without so much as glancing in my direction for approval. Inside, a tempest of frustration brewed alongside an ever-growing fear that this day would slip entirely out of my grasp. As much as it pained me, confronting her seemed pointless. She wielded her years and relationships like weapons honed for just such battles. But deep down, a voice whispered, "This is your moment." And at that moment, I vowed, quietly to myself, that no matter how small the victory, I wouldn't let her completely overshadow what should be mine. In that vow lay a flicker of hope. Something told me that the tide would eventually turn. It was like watching a slow-moving train wreck, and I couldn't look away. Every time I scrolled through my social media feeds, there it was. Her face, smiling wide at events I knew nothing about. Megan, my supposed friend, had slithered into spaces where I once belonged. She stood in the same photos with people who I thought were my friends, attending gatherings I hadn't even heard of. Why wasn't I invited? The question echoed relentlessly in my mind, each repetition tightening the knot of betrayal in my chest. It felt like the world was spinning without me, each post a reminder that I was on the outside looking in. One particular image sent a sharp jab to my heart. A group photo from a mutual friend's recent birthday party. Everyone huddled together as if they were clutching onto something precious. And yet, there she was at the center, laughing as if the moment were hers to own. I remember staring at that photo for what felt like hours, feeling an icy chill creep through my veins. How did Megan find herself there while I was left out in the cold? Was this some oversight or an intentional snub? Every image was another blow to my already fragile sense of belonging. The realization hit me hard. Maybe it wasn't just Megan's charm, but something deeper that had shifted beneath the surface. A subtle rejection by those I once held dear. As I sat alone with my thoughts swirling in chaos around me, a simmering resolve began to form deep within. No longer would I be a mere spectator of my own life story. It was time for me to reclaim the narrative. And so began my journey, not just to uncover why she had replaced me, but to reclaim the place that rightfully belonged to me. Something had shifted between us, and the weight of it was suffocating. Rebecca, once my closest confidant, now felt like a stranger sitting across the table. We used to share everything, the kind of secrets only whispered between sisters, best friends. But lately, she was distant, a phantom of her former self. It started gradually, so subtly that at first I didn't even notice it. Phone calls went unanswered more frequently. Texts were replied to with one-word responses that felt colder than the Arctic wind. Our usual coffee dates dwindled into nothingness. When I asked if she wanted to meet up or go shopping like we used to, her excuses were vague and plentiful. Busy with work, feeling tired, or simply, I can't today. But what hurt the most wasn't just the lack of time spent together. It was being utterly excluded from something significant in her life. I would learn later about plans that she had made without me entirely. Plans once built on shared dreams and whispered hopes. I felt like an outsider, peering in through the fogged glass, trying desperately to clear away the mist. My heart ached with confusion and betrayal. Was it something I said? Something I did? My mind raced round and round this endless loop as I lay awake at night staring at shadows creeping along my ceiling. Could she not see how much this hurt me? Rebecca! I finally confronted her one day after yet another cold interaction. What's going on? You seem different. Her eyes flickered momentarily with something unreadable before turning back to her phone screen. Nothing's wrong. She shrugged off my concern as though brushing away lint from her coat. But everything felt wrong. Our laughter-filled conversations replaced by awkward small talk. Our closeness replaced by an invisible chasm I couldn't cross no matter how hard I tried. I realized then that sometimes battles are fought in silence, a scarring quietude that leaves deeper marks than words ever could. They say love is priceless, but slowly I started realizing that this wasn't true. Not in my world anyway. I found myself standing in a whirlwind of wedding preparations, drowning in invoices and receipts like a boat taking on water too fast to bail out. Each payment felt like another brick being laid in a wall that was closing me off from the life I'd once known. It began innocently enough. A dress here, flowers there. Small things, really. But as the date drew closer, The costs spiraled out of control like a storm I couldn't escape from. Every vendor seemed to have their hand outstretched, and I was the one footing the bill yet again. Surely it's worth it, I consoled myself under my breath as I reviewed yet another contract for overpriced decorations. This is about love, our future. But an unsettling voice lingered at the back of my mind, whispering doubts about what love really meant when it came with such a hefty price tag. Then came the honeymoon surprise, an extravagant trip to Bali that I'd arranged secretly, hoping it would rekindle something, anything between us. The thought of Bali's sun-drenched beaches and tranquil waves offered a brief escape from my mounting anxiety and financial strain. Yet each time I swiped my card or wrote another check, a part of me crumbled under the weight of expectation versus reality. Wasn't this supposed to be our dream? Then why did it feel so one-sided? I stood alone in my swirling chaos, holding on to a fantasy that was fracturing before my eyes. The question gnawed at me. Was this really worth sacrificing pieces of myself for someone who seemed oblivious to my struggle? I knew then that something had to change, but first I needed to finish what I'd started. It's amazing how a seemingly ordinary day can turn into an emotional maelstrom. There I was at my desk, the rhythmic clatter of keyboards and soft murmur of office chatter surrounding me, only to have my world ruptured by a few careless words. "Did you see the photos from Rebecca's dress shopping?" my coworker casually inquired, her voice slicing through the mundane hum like a cold blade. My heart stopped. Dress shopping? For Rebecca? My mind raced, struggling to process what I'd just heard. I felt a sharp pang of betrayal, a churning disbelief that gnawed at my insides as I forced myself to ask, "What dress shopping?" My voice trembled slightly, belying the calm facade I attempted to project. "Oh," she said, surprised by my ignorance. "She went last weekend. There were all these gorgeous dresses. Everyone helped her pick out the perfect one." Her words dripped with enthusiasm, oblivious to the waves of hurt crashing over me. Each syllable further cemented the reality that somehow, I'd been excluded. I mustered a nod and turned back to my screen, trying to shield my emotions beneath a facade of indifference while inside, resentment brewed like a storm. Why hadn't she invited me? We were friends, or so I thought. Was there something wrong with me? Images flashed in my mind. Rebecca smiling amidst racks of white lace, surrounded by laughter and friends. All without me. A deep-seated ache settled in my chest. Am I not good enough for even this small part of her life? In that moment, I resolved to confront this exclusion head-on rather than let it fester into bitterness. But first, I needed to find strength within myself, strength to face whatever answers awaited. And so began another chapter in a saga far too familiar. Facing betrayal not with tears or anger, but with clarity and resolve. Sometimes, the smallest words of another can shatter the fragile walls you've built around your heart. I remember standing there, feeling the cold seep into my bones as Rebecca's casual words washed over me. Oh, it was just spontaneous. Megan's always been so free. Her tone was light, dismissive even, as though what had happened could easily be wrapped up in a ribbon of spontaneity and tossed aside like it meant nothing. But to me, it felt like a punch to the gut, raw and unexpected. I watched Rebecca with eyes that betrayed none of my inner turmoil. Inside, though, I screamed at the injustice of it all. How could she downplay something so significant? Didn't she see how Megan's actions had left scars on my heart? Or perhaps she saw them but chose to ignore their depth. "Free," she called her, a word that seemed to shimmer with an innocence that belied the chaos it caused. But freedom isn't breaking someone else's spirit. It's not forging chains from betrayal and calling them liberation. As Rebecca spoke on, oblivious to my silent storm, I wondered if this was how everything would be reduced, from agony to spur-of-the-moment indulgence. Wasn't there a line where spontaneity turned into selfishness? My mind raced back through memories of Megan's careless antics disguised as freedom. Each instance was like a warning light flashing in the dark, a sign I had missed or chose to overlook until now. In that moment, I realized Rebecca wasn't just defending Megan. She was defending herself too. By minimizing what had happened, she protected her own complicity in encouraging such freedom. It stung deeper than any wound. Being told that my hurt was merely collateral damage in someone else's pursuit of living unrestrained. My resolve hardened then. If they couldn't understand my pain, I would make them feel the weight of their actions. It felt like a punch to the gut. When I realized I wasn't included in the bridal shower or bachelorette party planning. Sitting alone in my dimly lit room, the weight of exclusion pressed heavily on my chest. Still, I couldn't let my sister down. We were family, and despite everything, I believed that counted for something. As I scrolled through social media, images of the vibrant group chats and cheerful brunches that I'd been left out of flashed across my screen. Each picture told a story of laughter and excitement, stories they never intended for me to be part of. I couldn't help but wonder why. Was there something I said, or did? Or was it simply that they didn't see me as one of them? Despite the swirl of emotions, determination coursed through my veins like fire. My role in this wedding might not involve planning parties, but it was still significant in its own right. So, with renewed resolve, I dove headfirst into helping prepare for her big day. In those quiet moments late at night, when everyone else was asleep, I'd find myself assembling wedding favors, or double-checking her endless list of vendors and schedules. As sadness mingled with resilience within me, a small voice whispered, "You are enough." Slowly but surely, each task completed became a small victory. Each favor box a silent testament that despite being sidelined by those closer to her now, I wouldn't let anyone dim the light of what this day meant. When you're sidelined by those you love most, it's tempting to walk away. But sometimes standing your ground is an act of love too powerful to ignore. And so, in every ribbon tied and centerpiece arranged, there lay my silent promise. Whatever happens next, this is me choosing love over pain. It was one of those evenings where the air seemed thick with secrets, an unsettling quiet that hung around like a shadow. I wandered through the dimly lit hallway of our modest home, heading towards the kitchen, hoping to find some solace in a warm cup of tea. But as I approached, hushed voices caught my attention. My name punctuating their conversation like a sharp knife cutting through silence. I paused, heart pounding against my ribcage, and leaned closer to the door's edge. Mom's voice rang out clear amidst the whispers of my sisters, Megan and Rebecca. "Lisa is so controlling." She sighed heavily, frustration lacing every word. "Difficult doesn't even begin to cover it." Her words hit me like a sudden gust of icy wind, chilling me to my core. A part of me wanted to barge in and demand answers, but I found myself frozen in place, rooted by disbelief and a profound sense of betrayal. Controlling? Difficult? Is this really how they saw me? As someone who loved fiercely and tried desperately to hold us all together in the chaos that often surrounded our family, it felt like my world was shattering around me. I just wish she could see things from our perspective, Mom continued, her tone softening slightly, but still tinged with exasperation. Megan and Rebecca murmured their agreements. Their voices were softer but equally affirming. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as realization set in. This wasn't just a passing judgment. It was how they truly felt. Part of me wanted to storm in and defend myself, but another part hesitated, held back by an overwhelming fear of confrontation. As I stood there trembling, I realized that this moment marked a turning point. A moment that would either break me or push me toward reclaiming my own narrative. It was time for change. Time to face these hidden truths and fight for the love and respect I deserved. The moment Tyler spoke, it was like a jolt of electricity surged through my body. "Lisa, you need to confront Rebecca," he said, his voice steady, yet filled with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. My heart raced as I processed his words. For far too long, I'd been drowning in a sea of speculation and second-guessing, caught in a web of my own making. Could it be that simple? Just ask her? I could feel the weight of Tyler's gaze on me, willing me to find the courage buried beneath layers of fear and doubt. "No more guessing," he added firmly, cutting through the fog that had clouded my mind for weeks. A part of me wanted to protest, to cling to the safety of suspicion where I could nurse my wounds without exposing them further. But then another voice inside me whispered, "Enough is enough." How many nights had I spent wide awake, replaying every interaction with Rebecca over and over again in my mind? How many times had I tried to read between lines that perhaps didn't even exist? It was time to face whatever truth awaited me directly from her lips. Tyler reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. His touch was grounding, an anchor amid the storm raging within me. "You deserve answers," he reminded me softly. His belief in me strengthened my resolve, igniting a flicker of bravery that began to grow steadily into something more. As I nodded slowly, committing myself to this course of action, I realized that no matter what Rebecca might say or do next, confronting her was about reclaiming my power. With each passing second, the fear receded just a little more, giving way to something new, determination. It was time for answers. It was time for truth. And so, with Tyler by my side, a newfound courage in my heart, I took a deep breath and prepared for what lay ahead. When I first stepped into the room, my heart was a tangled mess of hope and trepidation. The familiar creak of the floorboards beneath me seemed to echo my anxiety as I crossed the threshold into what I foolishly believed would be a gathering for reconciliation. My family sat around the living room, expressions masked with forced smiles, a thin veneer barely concealing the tension hanging thick in the air. "Lisa," my mother said, gesturing for me to sit, her voice a little too bright, like she was compensating for something darker lurking just beneath. As I settled into the worn armchair opposite her, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping onto a battlefield rather than into a sanctuary of understanding. I had come here seeking clarity, a desperate longing to unravel the misunderstandings that had frayed our bonds and left me questioning where I truly belonged in this family. Instead, what followed felt like an ambush, meticulously planned and executed with precision. Voices rose quickly, my brother's accusations sharp as daggers. "You never cared about us. It's always been about you and your career," he spat out, each word striking like a blow to my chest. My mind raced, struggling to keep up with their relentless barrage of grievances. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was meant to be different, a chance to mend broken ties. But as their words rained down on me, my initial hope crumbled, replaced by a growing sense of betrayal and disbelief. Why had they invited me here? Was this really how little they thought of me? The questions swirled in my head like an unending storm. As they continued their verbal assault, something shifted within me, a flicker of resolve ignited by years of quiet endurance. A whisper inside urged me not to bow under this weight, but to stand firm. It wasn't clarity that awaited me here, but perhaps something even more important. Strength. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, as if the very ground had been pulled out from under me. "Lisa," my mother began, her voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. "You're not welcome at Rebecca's wedding." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and struggling to process what she had just said. I felt a chill sweep over me, my mind racing back through everything that had happened between us. The long-standing rivalry with Rebecca that I never asked for, but was thrust upon me. Mom continued, her tone growing sharper. "You always try to overshadow her. You can't just let her have this one moment." The accusation stung like salt in an open wound. How could she believe I would ever intentionally hurt my sister? But deep down I knew why. It was easier for her to see Rebecca as the victim in our story, even when it meant sacrificing fairness or understanding. "I don't want to overshadow anyone," I finally managed to say, my voice a mere whisper against the storm inside me. My heart ached with the weight of unspoken words and misunderstood intentions. Why couldn't she see how much I loved both her and Rebecca? This wasn't just about a wedding invitation revoked. It was about years of feeling unseen and unheard. Years of trying to fit into a mold I never quite could. But in that moment of heartbreak, something shifted within me. A spark of defiance ignited by years of injustice. I realized that if they couldn't accept me for who I am, and instead saw me only as a shadow looming over their perfect image of family happiness, then maybe it was time to step out of those shadows entirely. As tears threatened to spill over, I turned away from my mother's icy judgment. It was time to carve out my own path, away from their expectations and closer toward finding peace within myself. There's a silence that cuts deeper than any scream. I sat there, across from my mother at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of her words still hanging in the air like an unwelcome spectre. "Lisa won't attend," she had said, her voice as cool and flat as a winter lake. Not as a guest, not as a bridesmaid, nor even as my maid of honor. The betrayal wrapped around my heart, squeezing with an intensity I hadn't thought possible. For a moment, I couldn't process it. Lisa, my sister, my confidant through every heartbreak, who had danced around our room with me to celebrate life's triumphs, had chosen not to stand by me on one of the most significant days of my life. Why? How could she do this? I wanted to scream at Mom, demand reasons that might make some semblance of sense out of this madness. Instead, I sat frozen, the quiet between us growing ever more oppressive. My mind raced back to memories of Lisa and me, playing dress-up as kids, dreaming about this day, promising to be each other's everything when it finally came. Mum sipped her tea nonchalantly, as if discussing the weather, rather than delivering a blow to my heart. "It's for the best," she murmured. Her indifference was a cold splash of reality. Did they think this decision was best for them or for me? Was this another chess move in their endless games of power and control? In that moment, A newfound resolve began to take shape within me. A flicker at first, but quickly gaining strength. If Lisa wouldn't be there to hold my bouquet and support me down this path, then I would walk bravely alone, or find those who truly wanted to share in my joy. I looked up at Mom with determination blazing in my eyes. This wouldn't be the end. It was just the beginning. The room was silent as I finally hung up the phone. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, each one more tumultuous than the last. But now, there was a strange calm settling over me. A heavy, resolute calm. I sat there at my desk, staring at the list of expenses and contributions that had piled up over the months for Paul and my supposed future together. One by one, I began to cross them off. "Are you sure about this?" echoed my sister's voice from earlier that day, her tone laced with concern. "Yes," I replied with a steadiness that surprised even me. "I'm very sure." The pen in my hand moved with a deliberate purpose now, crossing out each item. Wedding venue deposit, catering initial payment, dress fittings. And then, the final significant contribution. The $8,600 for our dream honeymoon to Bali. My heart should have ached at the thought of it all unraveling so quickly. But instead, there was an unexpected sense of liberation washing over me. I realized then that every dollar was a piece of my heart that I had given away too easily. Our shared dreams were not mutual. They were illusions built on shaky foundations. Paul's betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a brutal awakening to how one-sided our commitments really were. With each cancellation call I made, his words from our last argument played like a broken record in my mind. "You'll never actually leave." But here I was, doing exactly what he believed impossible, reclaiming myself from our tangled mess of lies and deceit. As I finished cancelling the final arrangement and put down my phone for good this time, a newfound strength surged through me. This wasn't just about cutting financial ties. It was about cutting emotional ones too. Standing up from my desk felt like standing up for myself for the first time in too long. It was only just the beginning of taking back what was truly mine. I remember standing in the center of my dimly lit living room, staring at the spreadsheet on my laptop screen. Each row was a glaring reminder of how much I had given. Over $15,000 drained from my accounts in the name of love and support. My heart thudded with a painful mix of anger and betrayal. How did we get here? How did I become an ATM instead of a cherished partner? As I scrolled through the transactions, each dollar seemed to whisper accusations. "You let it happen," they taunted. It wasn't just about the money. It was about everything it represented. Trust shattered like delicate glass underfoot. Love that had quietly rotted away while I wasn't looking. My phone buzzed silently beside me, a message notification lighting up briefly. Another request for assistance, no doubt. Another demand cloaked in sweet words promising change that would never come. "No more," I whispered to myself, voice barely louder than a breath, yet filled with newfound determination. I could feel warmth pooling in my chest, a simmering resolve that had been dormant for too long. It was time for action. With trembling finger but unwavering will, I began transferring funds back to my account, hard-earned money flowing like water returning to its source. Each transaction reversed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Finally, there was only one thing left to do: disconnect. My heart raced as I opened our chat history, years of messages scrolling by and an instant flashback of better times, now soured by reality's harsh truth. Taking a deep breath, I typed out what needed to be said. We're over. Hitting Sen felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown freedom, terrifying but exhilarating all at once. A silence settled around me like fresh snow, cutting him off completely. Felt less like loss and more like liberation. The ties were broken. Now it was time for healing. I remember the moment Olivia's words shattered my world like it was yesterday. Her voice was tinged with both hesitation and urgency, as if she was holding a secret too heavy to bear alone. "Lisa," she whispered, her eyes avoiding mine. "There's something you need to know." That's when the pit in my stomach began to form. An uncomfortable knot of dread twisting tighter with each passing second. As we sat together in my tiny kitchen, the air around us grew tense and suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, trapping us in this sudden revelation that I could have never prepared for. I took a deep breath, hoping to steady myself for whatever storm was about to hit. But nothing could brace me for what Olivia said next. "Mom's been talking about you," she confessed, her words sharp and bitter on the air. "To everyone. Our friends, neighbors. She's been poisoning your image for months now." Each word felt like a dagger piercing through me. My heart thudded painfully against my chest as I tried to comprehend why my own mother would do something so cruel. Why would she want to ruin how people saw me? What had I done that warranted such betrayal from someone who should love me unconditionally? As Olivia continued explaining, detailing how our mother had spun tales of deceit and painted me in colors of dishonor, I felt a scorching wave of anger rise alongside my hurt. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade ever could, leaving scars invisible yet profound on the fabric of trust I'd woven into family bonds. My mind raced through memories. Did others look at me differently now because of her lies? Every glance or whisper suddenly felt loaded with suspicion and judgment. How had I missed this undercurrent snaking through my life for so long? But amidst the chaos of emotions swirling within me, anger clashing with sorrow, I found a glimmer of resolve beginning to crystallize. A quiet determination took root. It was time to reclaim my narrative and unravel the web she had spun around me. And so began the fight for truth, the fight for my own voice. The moment Aunt Catherine spoke, it was as if a veil lifted, revealing truths in the shadows I had been too blind to see. "You're not alone in this," she began, her voice steady, but laced with a heaviness that told me she'd carried her own burdens for far too long. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, my mind racing back through memories like an old film reel. Every scene suddenly more sinister under this newfound light. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves were closing in to listen to our whispered revelations. "Deborah's done this before," Aunt Catherine continued, her eyes meeting mine with a solidarity I desperately needed. To me and others. Her confession pierced through my defenses like a bolt of lightning splitting a tree. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt betrayed anew. How many lives had Deborah's manipulations touched? How many relationships had she quietly poisoned while maintaining her facade of innocence and charm? She isolated me, made sure I depended on her approval, Catherine explained, her gaze distant as she recounted the familiar dance of manipulation and deceit. In that moment, a tide of anger washed over me, not just for myself, but for everyone who had unknowingly fallen into Deborah's web. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was a pattern, a calculated game she played without remorse. Aunt Catherine's revelation became a mirror, reflecting not only Deborah's deceit, but also my own vulnerabilities. the blind trust I'd placed in someone so unworthy. "We can fight this," Catherine said softly but firmly, reaching across the table to place her hand over mine. Her touch anchored me in the storm of emotions raging inside. This was no longer about reclaiming my life from Deborah's grasp. It was about justice, about unraveling the lies she wove around us all. And with that resolve building within me, I knew that together we could turn the tides. This battle was far from over. I sat at the edge of my bed, the soft glow from the evening sun casting long shadows across the room. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched my phone, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. James had called earlier, his voice laced with urgency, telling me he needed to show me something important. Deep down, I felt a churning anxiety, the kind that whispers that everything you thought was safe and familiar might soon unravel. When James entered my apartment, his expression was solemn, a stark contrast to the usual warmth he radiated. He didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Instead, he handed me his phone, screen aglow with a series of messages that immediately drew my eye. "You need to see this," he said softly, his eyes searching mine for understanding. As I scrolled through the messages, confusion clouded my mind. They were supposedly from Lisa to Rebecca, but sounded off, like words plucked from someone else's narrative entirely. And then it hit me like a cold wave. These weren't Lisa's words at all. Deborah had rerouted Lisa's messages and impersonated her. Each text was dripping with malice and deceit. Why? Why would she do this? The question tumbled out before I could catch it. A sick realization settled in my stomach. A betrayal so deep it left me reeling. James sat beside me quietly, as if giving me space to process this new reality. The tangled web Deborah had spun, putting words into Lisa's mouth and driving a wedge between us all. In that moment of clarity amid chaos, I knew our lives would never be the same again. But there was also a flicker of resolve taking root within me. Understanding motives is one thing. Confronting them is another story altogether. I looked up at James, determination hardening in my gaze. "We have to confront her," I declared with newfound strength surging through me. The time for clarity and truth had come. I felt the tension in the air shift before she even stepped through the door. It was as if a storm had descended into my office, completely disrupting the calm I'd painstakingly built over the years. My colleague's eyes darted towards the entrance, and there she was, Deborah, her face a mask of fury and betrayal, charging towards me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Lisa!" Her voice echoed around the room, sharp and accusing. "How could you do this to me?" The murmurs began immediately, whispers slicing through the office atmosphere like shards of glass. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood frozen at my desk, trying to comprehend what was happening. "What are you talking about, Deborah?" I asked, struggling to maintain composure while everyone stared. Her words tumbled out like a torrent. Accusations of theft, wild, unfounded, but delivered with such conviction that doubt crept into my mind despite myself. "You stole from me," she exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger that felt like it pierced right through me. My world tilted on its axis as I processed her claim. How had things deteriorated to this point? We'd once been close, collaborators on projects and confidants after hours. But now, had I missed signs of this unraveling? Inside me battled fear and anger. Fear of what these allegations could do to my career and anger at being blindsided so publicly. A small voice inside urged calmness, even as panic clutched at me. "Stay composed, Lisa. Don't let her see you break." I took a deep breath, meeting her gaze head on. "Deborah," I said quietly, yet firmly, "let's discuss this privately." But control was slipping through my fingers. The damage had already begun. The tension in the room thickened with every heartbeat. Friendships frayed in an instant under the weight of her words. Yet amidst this chaos rose a resolve within me, a quiet assurance that I would not allow falsehoods to define my narrative. As silence wrapped around us both like an audience awaiting performance's next act, one thing became crystal clear. This public confrontation was only the beginning. I stood at the threshold of the living room, my heart pounding in rhythm with the clock on the wall. This was it, the moment I had prepared for, yet one that filled me with a mix of dread and determination. As I stepped inside, the eyes of my family turned towards me, each pair holding varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice trembling despite my efforts to steady it. "I know you're wondering why I asked to meet today." My fingers clutched the folder tighter, its contents a testament to months of deception and betrayal. Deeds that had carved holes in the fabric of our family trust. Taking a deep breath, I locked eyes with my brother, Mark. He sat relaxed, leaning back as if this were just another family gathering, rather than an intervention aimed at him. His nonchalance only fueled my resolve. "For too long," I said, raising the folder slightly. "We've been deceived by lies and manipulation. Today, that stops." There was a murmur among them, a mixture of surprise and realization dawning painfully slow. It wasn't easy to speak these truths aloud. Every word felt like a wound reopening, but I had no choice. The evidence within these pages wasn't just facts. They were stories of betrayal etched into our lives, financial records manipulated, promises broken under false pretenses. These documents, I gestured toward the folder now open in my hands, show us exactly what's been happening behind our backs. My voice grew stronger as I continued, each revelation landing like heavy stones dropped into water, rippling shockwaves through our collective consciousness. Mark shifted uneasily now, his once confident facade cracked under scrutiny's weight. I'd held back too long out of love for him, but allowing this toxicity to fester would have been an even greater betrayal. To myself, and to everyone here who deserved better. A silence enveloped us once more. A silence pregnant with potential for confrontation or healing. I realized that whatever came next depended not only on those gathered around me, but also on Mark's willingness to face these undeniable truths head on. The moment I hung up the phone with Lisa, my heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. I could already imagine her bubbly laughter and how she would make everything feel right again. But as soon as that call ended, a familiar knot of tension twisted in my stomach. The thought of confronting my mother loomed over me like a dark cloud. I took a deep breath, gathering courage from the promise I'd made to myself. This time, things would be different. I refused to let anyone else dictate the joy I wanted for my wedding day. It was my life, my choice. "Mom," I started, finding her seated at the kitchen table, leafing through florist brochures. Her eyes lifted to mine, with that expectant look she always wore when she believed she knew best. "Rebecca, what is it? Is something wrong?" she asked, sensing the gravity in my voice. I hesitated for just a moment, memories of past disagreements flashing through my mind like haunting ghosts, each one telling its own tale of compromise and self-betrayal. I've decided to reinstate Lisa as my maid of honor, I announced firmly. She means so much to me, and my wedding day wouldn't feel right without her by my side. There was a pause, an electric silence that stretched between us. It was as if the very air around us held its breath. Rebecca, Mom began slowly, her tone laced with disapproval and a hint of incredulity. After everything, I cut in softly but resolutely. This is non-negotiable. My decision is final. With each word spoken aloud, I felt an invisible weight lifting from my shoulders. A boundary set not out of rebellion, but from love for myself and those truly important to me. As our eyes met again across that table, for the first time in forever, there was understanding rather than confrontation. This was how it should be. No more compromises on happiness. I remember the day it finally clicked. The moment I realized I was done sacrificing parts of myself just to feel included. It was like waking up from a long, exhausting dream. I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection staring back at me, with eyes that were tired but determined. No more, I whispered, as if saying it out loud made it more real. No more losing myself to keep others happy. Returning to my role wasn't easy. It was like stepping into a familiar room that felt strangely different. The place hadn't changed, but I had. Before, every nod and smile was a currency for acceptance, a silent agreement to prioritize their needs over mine. But now, I knew my worth. Sitting at my desk, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of old expectations lingering in the air. Colleagues approached with their usual requests, barely veiled demands disguised as favors. And for a fleeting moment, the old instincts kicked in. Agreeing would be so easy, like slipping into an old pair of shoes worn from years of use. But then something inside me sparked, a tiny voice growing louder. Your well-being matters too. Lisa, could you handle this? Someone called out, draping another task onto my already full plate without so much as a pause for my response. For the first time, I didn't flinch or rush to appease them. Instead, I looked up calmly and replied with newfound strength in my voice. I'm sorry, but I can't take that on right now. A simple sentence, yet it felt like an act of rebellion. The silence that followed was thick. Curiosity mixed with disbelief lingered in their eyes. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. Setting boundaries didn't make me less, it made me whole. In reclaiming my space, I began crafting a new narrative, not just for how others saw me, but how I saw myself. No longer a background player in my own life story. The air felt thick with unspoken words as I stood there, trying to steady my breath. It was my wedding day, a supposed celebration of love and unity. But beneath the surface, a tumultuous sea of emotions churned relentlessly. Mom moved around the room with a practiced grace, her smile warm yet almost painfully polite. She mingled effortlessly with guests, her laughter ringing hollow in my ears. To anyone watching, she seemed the picture of maternal pride. But I knew better. The facade she wore was one I'd become all too familiar with over the years. A mask that hid the resentment she never quite managed to voice aloud. As if sensing my scrutiny, her eyes briefly met mine across the crowded room. For a fleeting second, I hoped for some sign of genuine connection. Yet just as quickly, she looked away, casting her attention elsewhere. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever truly see past her carefully constructed exterior. Lisa, Rebecca's voice pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. My best friend since childhood, and bridesmaid today. Her presence felt like a balm on my aching soul. Hey, I whispered, trying to muster a smile. Rebecca reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, as reassurance seeped through our intertwined fingers. You okay? I nodded slowly, not entirely convinced by my own response, but grateful for Rebecca's unwavering support. There was something quietly healing about this moment between us. An anchor amid the storm of family complexity swirling around me. You deserve happiness today, Rebecca reminded me softly, those simple words grounding me more than anything else could. As I stood there beside her, I realized that despite the unresolved tension hanging heavily in the air, this day belonged to me, to us, and no one else could taint that truth. With renewed resolve coursing through me like fire in my veins, I decided right then to embrace what joy awaited and to finally take back control. I never thought I would hear the words that came out of my mother's mouth that evening. I've been seeing a therapist, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, as if admitting to an unspeakable sin. The room seemed to freeze around us, silence hanging heavy in the air, punctuated only by the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. For years, I'd felt her unspoken competition with me, like a shadow always lurking just out of sight, but never quite leaving me alone. Growing up, every achievement of mine seemed to cast doubt upon her own choices and capabilities. It was as though my success was a reminder of something she had lost or given up along the way. I realized, she continued, her eyes fixed on some point beyond my shoulder, that it wasn't fair to you, to feel like you couldn't shine without making me feel dimmed. Her words were halting, but carried a weight I hadn't expected. Was this an olive branch? A genuine attempt at understanding? God knows how long I've waited for such acknowledgement from her. Deep down, there had always been this longing for her approval, paired with the frustration that stemmed from an invisible barrier between us. Like two parallel lines destined to run alongside each other forever, but never truly meet. So many nights I'd lay awake questioning my worthiness, whether my accomplishments were ever enough in her eyes. But now, here she was, trying to bridge that chasm with vulnerability. You have so many strengths, Lisa, she said softly, finally meeting my gaze. Strengths I wish I'd had at your age. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness wash over me. Relief because maybe this could be the start of something new. An honest relationship built on mutual respect rather than rivalry. Sadness for all the time, lost to misunderstandings and silent struggles. Her journey wasn't just about acknowledging my strengths. It was also about finding peace within herself. And perhaps, through this revelation of hers, we both could find what we've been searching for all along. Acceptance. It's a strange feeling sitting in a circle with my family after everything we've been through. I never imagined we'd end up here, in this quiet therapy room, with its soft pastel walls and gentle lighting that seemed to promise hope. Each of us perched awkwardly on our chairs, as if afraid to break the fragile silence that hung heavy between us. But deep down, beneath my trepidation, there was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Our therapist's voice was calm and inviting as she encouraged us to speak openly, to share our truths. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each thump echoing through the years of silence and unsaid words. Would they understand? Would they even listen? My mind was a whirlwind of doubts and fears. But amidst it all, one thought emerged clear and steady. I needed this. Taking a deep breath, I began to speak. I've realized something important, I said, my voice wavering yet determined. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing you away. It's about protecting myself. It's about loving myself enough to know what I can and cannot accept. As the words tumbled out of me, I felt an unfamiliar sense of liberation washing over me. I was finally claiming my truth. I watched their faces closely for any hint of understanding or resistance. To my surprise, there were nods, slow at first, but then more affirming, as if they too were discovering new terrain within themselves. In that moment, I understood that boundaries were not just lines drawn in sand, but acts of self-love, a way to heal the wounds left by betrayal and reclaim my dignity and strength. And for perhaps the first time ever, I felt a stir of a genuine hope that maybe we could find our way back to each other, and maybe even build something better than before.